A lot is going on in the world, and we'll be talking about that here on Pod TV, seeing what folks have to say about a number of these news stories that are taking place around the world. Andy Burnham becomes the United Kingdom's Prime Minister. UK leader Burnham gathers his cabinet after sweeping away Starmer supporters, and he's promising hope and change. He's pledging to show how policies will be paid for after ex-minister hits out at unfunded tax cuts. So definitely that is something that's going on over there in the UK. Amid U.S.-Iran war, Houthi rebels threaten to blockade another key strait. Yemen Houthis declare a naval blockade on Saudi Arabia, widening the threat to the global oil supplies. And a Chinese oil tanker U-turns in Red Sea after Houthis attack threat. So definitely it looks like Yemen's Iranian-backed Houthis, they will block Saudi shipping at Red Sea Gateway. Cockroach Junta Party protests in Delhi's India youth-led cockroach movement vows to continue protest after the police crackdown. So they're vowing to continue the protest. They're saying they won't back down. Indian student protesters returned after the police crackdown in that part of the world. 2 tourists were injured in a knife attack at the Acropolis. So 2 Americans stabbed outside the Acropolis in Greece. Apparently this was random attacks and all along those lines. And how 2 brothers dug for dead relatives with a shovel and a kitchen knife. The U.S. saw an investment boom in Venezuela. Now it's a $37 billion problem. So Venezuela earthquake death toll surpasses 5,000. Confusion and lack of equipment hindered Venezuela's response to earthquake that killed over 5,000, according to a report coming out of that part of the world. And definitely, like I said, we've got a lot of things taking place in the world, including some good news. Rare identical quadruplet girls born in Australian hospital. So Australian women gives birth to miracle identical quadruplets. So definitely this is a rarity in the sense of birth. So mom gives birth to rare identical quadruplets following a high-risk pregnancy. Our 4 precious miracles is what is being said out of that particular part of the world. Bahrain sounds its missile alert siren as Iran targets the island kingdom with a new barrage. Iran forces attack Bahrain and Kuwait after U.S. hits Iranian ports and cities. So that's something else that we're hearing as well. And protesters in Ukraine demand a military leadership change. Ukrainian general at the root of the latest protest against Zelensky. So that's something else that we're hearing about as well, as those kind of stories are continuing. And Ukraine's top general could be on the way out. So Ukraine's army chief expected to lose his job after weeks of protests. And Japan protests Chinese live fire drill in nearby waters. So groundless, China dismisses Japanese protest over live fire drill with Akinatori EEZ. So Chinese warships holds live fire drill inside Japan's economic waters for the first time. And the U.S. condemns Chinese dangerous and aggressive acts after Philippine sailor was injured at a disputed shoal. So Philippines and China summoned each other's envoys over the South China Sea incident. So Philippines say China sailor was injured in a skirmish with the Chinese Coast Guard. And healthy diet too expensive for 1 in 3 people globally is what the UN report is finding. So hunger is falling, but still higher than pre-COVID levels, according to that UN report. World hunger eases for a 3rd year, but war and El Nino pose a risk. And EU farming supports contributing to pricier, healthier foods, is what the UN is saying. Rubio arrives in Philippines as the U.S. criticizes Beijing's dangerous actions in the South China Sea. Southeast Asian ministers set the call for opening of the Strait of Hormuz in their Manila talks. Asian diplomats voiced serious concern over the Iran war and the energy crisis. And Ukraine fires 400 drones toward Moscow as Zelensky grapples with protests. And China G touts open source AI and takes a swipe at U.S. dominance. At World AI Forum, four signs China's AI industry is growing up. Shanghai Science Forum photos show China's AI and robotic advances, and all in that space. And the U.S. military has identified two soldiers killed in Iranian attack on Jordan. And definitely that is what is being reported as well. Isabella Gonzalez, a 19-year-old Army private from Carrollton, was killed in the strike on Jordan, according to what the Pentagon is reporting. And Ann Whitcomb was hit on the head, reportedly with hammer. Prosecutors say Joshua Carey faces murder charge in Ann Whitcomb's death. So the man charged with the murder of former MP Ann Whitcomb, and definitely it looks like she was struck with a hammer 21 times, and all in that space. And Italians protest in Bologna after Moroccan man dies during arrest. So dozens hurt in that protest after man dies while being restrained by police. Italy's Melania calls for truth on arrest death and condemns the clash. So, and Israel is building a mile-long earthen barrier inside Gaza, entrenching its division. So definitely that's something we're hearing about as well. And 10 were killed as Russian attacks on merchant ships in Black Sea intensify. 4 Indians killed in attack on ship leaving Ukraine's Odessa, according to reports from New Delhi. And it definitely looks like there was a Russian attack on coin ship off of Ukraine's Odessa that killed 10. So it definitely looks like there are definitely a lot of things going on in the world and all in that space. I'll get to some U.S. news as well. But I'll get ready to bring in my fellow panels. I've got Rick Rosner with me. We'll see what he's got on his mind and all along those lines. I see that we've got a lot of things going on as Trump is vowing revenge on excuse me, Iran, and what to watch in Arizona's primaries. So we do have Arizona primaries as well. And it looks
Okay.
like
Gas is $4.02 a gallon now and heading up.
wow.
The possibility is that the U.S. is running out of missiles and that the War Department has been hiding this from Trump. Trump's approval remains 83% among Republicans,
Oh wow.
which is higher than Obama's approval and Bush's approval among their respective parties in
Yeah.
past presidencies. But everybody else is pretty disgusted with Trump at this point. But he holds on to the Republicans.
He holds on to the Republicans. It looks like there's an anti-ICE Army veteran that started a fire outside a Manhattan Federal building. So it looks like the man who set a fire outside 26 Federal Plaza was an Army veteran. So it looks like there's some people that apparently had a sign that was ICE off our streets. And he apparently set fire and then opened pellet guns attack outside Manhattan immigration court. And so it looks like there's somebody that is protesting the whole ICE situation.
Yeah, today is day 38 of Mitch McConnell either being dead or a vegetable or just hiding. And nobody can figure out what. And the governor, everybody's yelling at the governor to go to the hospital and see what's what. Because we've got a non-functioning senator there. And the thought is that if they can hide him until August 3rd, hide that he's dead or a vegetable, then they don't have to hold a special election.
Because we already got one special election. I know that Darlene Graham is focusing on kitchen table issues as she announces her full-term Senate ban, but Nardone is
really.
also the launcher bid for Graham's seat as well. So,
all right, so she's been a senator now for what, a week, and all of a sudden she's focused on the issues. What she's focused on is that Trump is endorsing her, right. Which makes her, if she decides to run, I guess she is, for a full 6 years, then that makes her a shoo-in.
Yeah, and it looks like Arizona Republicans have voted for a candidate to take on Governor Katie Hobbs. So it looks like there is still a possibility of the Republicans getting another seat in the gubernatorial map, as they will be taking on a centrist Democrat. So we'll see what goes on in that space and whether we lose another gubernatorial seat. But yes.
Well, it's too soon to tell. But it's crazy that the Republicans have any support now, considering what a piss poor job they have done over the past 18, 19 months.
Yeah. Oh well, Supreme Court is taking up an Alaska bush pilot fight to save his plane from forfeiture over a six-pack of beer. So apparently, the Supreme Court will review Alaska's bid to seize the pilot's plane over six packs of beer and everything like that. So that'll be interesting because they're citing duty to make sure that the Bill of Rights actually means something. Is why the Alaska pilot is taking the six-pack plane seizure case to the Supreme Court. So I guess he's holding up his rights and saying, "Hey, look, I'm going to take this all the way to the Supreme Court," as Nick has done, I think, a couple of times on a couple of cases. So we'll see how this all plays out. And the Tate brothers are back in the news. It looks like Andrew Tate's new charges include 19 for indecent images of a child and extreme porn. So the Tate brothers will be staying in jail as new details about the charges.
Yeah, Andrew Tate doesn't really care about his sex partners and his trafficking victims being over 18. He'll go 16. He'll go, he should be in. If you have read at all about him, he's got a long list of. He's a little bit like Epstein. He's been pulling his shit for years with impunity, and he's racked up a long list of alleged crimes with many witnesses against him.
Well, it looks like Donald Trump is going after Canada. We'll have to see if Sasha pops in what he thinks about it, because he's imposing a 50% tariff on Canadian goods. And apparently they said Trump is squeezing Canada, but don't expect Carney to roll over, because Carney blasted Trump's new tariffs, calling it a direct violation of the trade deals. But yeah, Trump's got a new 50% tariff on Canada, which is risking igniting a fresh trade war between us and our northern neighbors. So what's our thoughts around this notion of him putting a 50%?
It should be clear by now that Trump is an idiot, and almost everything he does is freaking wrong. And this starting a trade war with Canada, which is what he's doing, will hurt both countries. But Canada is prepared to stand up to him. And the courts are against this kind of crap. The Supreme Court has already ruled that these kind of tariffs are bullshit. And if the Republicans lose the House in November, the House will be against him. So, Canada, I'm sure, hates losing U.S. trade, but it looks like they'd only lose it for a few months until Trump's BS is reversed in the courts and possibly in Congress.
Yeah, possibly in Congress. It looks like the Pentagon has been sinking billions into the Iran war, and there's reports from the Washington Post that they're running short on cash, and even key Republicans are skeptical as Trump administration is gambling for more defense money. So apparently there's trying to be money given to the defense, and your favorite person, Hedges, is heading to Capitol Hill as Iran war drums beat louder. So I guess he's trying to get some more money.
Hegseth is another unqualified guy who is, between the two of them, they shouldn't have gone to war, and B, they're just throwing a lot of resources into it without much effect. If you look at the recent history of Iran since the regime took over in 1979, they have fought plenty of wars, and they're not known for frickin' rolling over. They fought a 6-year war, a real war, not just like an area, not just getting bombed, but as I keep saying, Iraq invaded them with 250,000 people and 2,000 tanks and hundreds of fighter planes, and this war went on from 1980 through 1986, and it did not cause Iran to roll over. So dropping a bunch of bombs on Iran, again, will not change Iran's policies to any great extent.
Well, this is a country that we used to fight with and used to be in conflict with, kind of like Venezuela. But apparently, they have come out and said they're not going to hold any more elections. So maybe Trump is going to get some ideas from him. But President Ortega of Nicaragua announces there will be no more elections. So Nicaragua Ortega says the country will never again hold elections. So they said there will be no more elections in the country, and he's saying that they're never going to hold elections again. So who knows? Trump might get an idea and try to do that himself. But this,
I don't know what's going on with that. I was not aware of any of this.
yeah, so that's just a crazy thing to have happen. The country say, "Hey, no, we don't want elections anymore whatsoever," and y'all can just skip the elections. I also saw that there was a crazy incident involving a hostage father and son charged with kidnapping two U.S. Forest Service biologists at gunpoint, and then were freed after a 15-hour hostage ordeal. So they now the father and son will appear in federal court. I don't know why you go trying to attack some Forest Service workers and everything like that. And, there is a funeral being held for was held for the Mississippi teenager Nolan Wells, who went on a trip and everything like that. And now there's a lot of questions as to what happened. Family of the black teen found dead after a boat trip agrees to inspect his cell phone with the DA, and that was done 6 days ago. And at Mississippi funeral yesterday, civil rights leaders, including Reverend Al Sharpton, are demanding justice for Nolan Wells, who is 18. So this is 2 weeks after a Mississippi football player's death, and there's still a lot of questions about this trip and what happened during the trip.
All right, so Trump is known for appointing loyalists, people who aren't the cleanest or the most competent, and also over appointing them, giving people, making people the head of too many agencies. So the head of the IRS is this guy named Frank Bisignano, who used to be co-COO of JP Morgan Chase.
Okay.
Now he's running the IRS and Social Security. And this guy is another kind of dirty guy that when he was running JP Morgan Chase, he directed his security staff to use software to snoop on the chief executives of the people he was working with,
right?
Also his employees. And this is the guy who's in charge now of the IRS and Social Security. He was also accused of financial irregularities. Anyway, the IRS is broken. The IRS has been broken for a while now. They are underfunded because Republicans like it that way. Because if the IRS doesn't have enough money, then they have a harder time auditing rich people. Mm-hmm. They can still go after regular people because they have computerized auditing systems that if you make a mistake on your tax return, you'll get a computer-generated letter from the IRS asking you to explain yourself. But if you're a rich person who has a couple lawyers and a couple of accountants, they can get up to all sorts of shenanigans, and the IRS isn't necessarily equipped to fight you on stuff. So under Biden did hire 87,000 new IRS employees, mostly for customer service and to go after high net worth individuals. When Trump took over, he turned it around and got rid of all of them. So the IRS continues to be a busted agency.
Well, speaking of busted agencies, apparently Mamdani and Trump are in a fight over the Israeli leader. So Zaran Mamdani, is considering the potential arrest of Benjamin Netanyahu.
It's not going to happen.
But they're saying that he has no jurisdiction to arrest him, according to the
Mamdani says he's going to try to arrest Netanyahu for war crimes because he's been Netanyahu's been indicted by international courts,
right,
world courts for war crimes. And so Mamdani's going to try to arrest him for that. People who know say that this just won't happen.
Yeah, because they think he has no jurisdiction, and even Trump says Netanyahu will not be arrested in the U.S. as New York Mayor is mulling the option. But according to the Israeli ambassador, he doesn't have jurisdiction because I think, if I remember correctly, those kind of like a lot of the embassies are under their protection.
Yeah, you've got the United Nations there. You got a bunch of embassies, and foreign leaders and embassy staff are generally, immune from being arrested for most crimes.
Oh, Trump is going to upgrade his Qatari gifted Air Force One. So he's already doing other things like the reflection pool and everything else. But apparently he wants to upgrade his Air Force. He's saying that, he's going to he wants it to be maxed out after security concerns were raised and everything like that. So I guess he's going to add some other security things to the gift that he got from Qatar and everything like that. So it'll be interesting to see what goes on, because they're even saying the White House is to further secure Trump's new Air Force One, but he plans to keep flying it domestically. So,
the deal is that Qatar gives Trump this plane that they couldn't sell. They've been sitting on this. They built an ultra blingy 747 that they were trying to sell for years. Nobody wanted to pay what they wanted for it, which is like $400 million or more. And so they decided, well, we can't sell it. Let's give it to Trump for political leverage. Then we'll at least get something out of it. So Trump takes the plane and he's going to use it as his new Air Force One, except that the existing Air Force Ones have more than $500 million worth of security measures installed so they can't be shot out of the sky by enemies. They have flak systems or chaff systems where if they're being like shot at by heat-seeking missiles, they can release lots of chaff to confuse the missiles. And 3 or 4 or half a dozen other systems that cost tens of millions of bucks a piece. And the new Air Force One, the fancy one, has none of this shit. And so Trump was stopped from using it. He used it a little bit, but we're in the middle of a war, so you have to go back to the old Air Force Ones that are more secure for Trump's security and the security of the hundreds of other people who fly with him.
Yeah,
Trump will take the new Air Force One plane with him when he leaves the presidency. It's supposed to go to his new presidential library. We know that's bullshit, that he'll just use it as his fancy personal plane. So they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars fixing up this plane that Trump is going to take with him. Now they have to spend hundreds of millions more to attach these security features when they have 2 Air Force Ones that are already fitted out. So basically, Trump is asking us to spend another $500 million for a personal plane that he will take with him.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out when he's going to get his personal plane, because that
was. Well, I was just listening to the jaded opinion of Rick Rosner, and calling for speculation that this is what he's going to do, which we don't know. But let's talk about Mamdani and the Democrats for a minute and what they offer to the United States. Nothing. As a matter of fact, Mamdani hasn't come up with one idea to actually help New York grow. And they have one idea here in Spain. What they do is they support startups by allowing $100,000 to be deducted if you put it into a qualified startup. Now, has Mamdani ever mentioned anything like that to stimulate the economy of New York? No, not one thought. All his thinking is, I'm going to give free bus tickets. I'm going to give free this, free that. And that's been the Democrats' destruction all along. They never offer anything that will actually improve the cake. All they do is they want to split up the cake differently. Now, if they started doing that, perhaps they would get 1 or 2 more votes. I don't know. But he has yet to say, okay, we're going to do this in New York. We're going to improve trade in New York by doing this. In other words, improve exports. We're going to improve our services by doing this. we're going to create an innovative hub like they do in Barcelona for startups by encouraging it using the tax code. Does he ever talk about things like that? No. Him, Barry Sanders, AOC, it's all, oh, let's take from the rich and give
the people in New York City are pretty happy with him compared to other.
Well, the people in Cuba are happy with Cuba.
He's got 58% approval versus 26% disapproval. And then I asked AI while you were talking, what is Mamdani doing for the people in New York City? And it starts with affordability, cost of living, rent freezes for millions.
Yeah, and see, that's wrong. The rent freezes are absolutely wrong. And that's because he comes from a world of being a tenant. If you're a landlord, here's what happens. And this is the reason it just runs down. Any place that has rent control ends up to being basically a big ghetto. Because here's the reason. First of all, if a tenant can't afford to live there, they need to move. In other words, you don't have a right to live in New York if you can't get a job to support yourself in New York, and you're basically holding a place for somebody who can. So if you can't afford the rent, you need to move. But here's the other problem. The landlord, if the landlord doesn't get basically their economic value of the property, they can't improve or maintain the property. So you know what they do? They basically let it go. So what Mamdani is for is not rent control. He's for creating slums in New York, which used to exist in the 70s. So if you want to see more slums in New York, think Cuba. That's where you're going to see New York as long as Mamdani
I lived in New York in the 80s, and New York was kind of shitty back then, but it was still a great city. It was crack ridden. You'd walk down the street, you'd see crack vials all over. They've cleaned it up since then. Rent control has been used in New York starting in 1943 for the past 83 years. Right now, true traditional rent control is now rare, covering just over 24,000 apartments. But there are many other apartments fall under the rent stabilization system, which started in 1969. So that's what 58.
But basically, it doesn't work. It's a horrible system.
You know, I lived in New York. I know how it works.
I worked there for 5 years, right?
Hey, hold on a second. Rick, hold on a second, because I just looked it up. Apparently, this just came out yesterday. Apparently, he just announced some plans to 50 reforms to slash red tape and increase support for small businesses. So he's overhauling the procedures and expanding navigation open, eliminates outdated permits, redundant paperwork, and unnecessary fines for restaurants, bodegas, barbershops, and small businesses across New York City. And from making it easier to host a bingo game to make it simpler to serve ice cream, the reforms target the pesky issues slowing their small business down. And he has a new executive order reinforcing excellence in city government's customer service standards, offering concert support and strengthen rights during inspection. So it does look like he just came up with this plan that'll face to get rid of some of the bureaucratic issues that are facing the city's roughly 180,000 small businesses. So he just released that, I think, yesterday. And everything.
By the way, that's good news. He's actually heading in the right direction, because the thing is, the problem with politicians is they get entrenched in these areas which basically don't help people out. But if he's doing that, then he's heading in the right direction. So and then he's going to
a little bit of rent stabilization helps people. So the cost of
rent stabilization.
Hold on, don't talk over me. 1-bedroom apartment, Manhattan, runs $4,400 to $5,400 a month. Brooklyn, $3,000 to $4,000. Queens, if you want, nobody likes Queens. It's not classy enough. $38,000 a month. So what a little bit of rent stabilization does, like my wife's cousin Bonnie, who's been a shrink for 30, 40 years, it lets her continue to live in New York City on as a shrink. She probably makes less than $200,000 a year. And that a little bit of rent control, even though, they fuck with her, they glue her locks, they don't fix anything, right?
That's the whole point. You turn it into a slum, and look,
it's not a slum. We've been in her
practice.
It's a nice building where they.
I can't move to New York because some idiot who can't afford to live there is holding down a place using rent control, and that's just not right. If I'm
So
making
you want
enough
to
money
kick out
and
this
I'm
lady
talented enough,
who's you want to
you know,
kick out this lady who's
absolutely.
lived in her place for 35 years, the
So what?
75-year-old woman who you're
Change
going
is
to
good.
say, get the hell out of this.
That's right. You know, if you can't afford it, lady, you got to go.
Then
Sorry.
you're an a-hole.
You know, no,
How many,
this is America, man.
most
We don't have
major
the right to live
American
where we
cities
want.
have some kind of rent protection for people.
They don't have it in Florida.
Well,
Where
yeah,
I grew
but
up,
Florida,
there was no
Florida is a
control. Are you
shithole
kidding me?
for you.
I didn't
Moved
even
out
hear
of
of such a
Florida.
thing.
You left Florida. You live in Spain.
I live in Spain, but the thing is, they never had rent control in Florida. It was the stupidest thing I ever heard. When I went to work in New York for 5 years, I couldn't believe they had something so stupid as rent control. Are you kidding me? You know, it doesn't work now. It will not work 10 years from now. It's an incredibly dumb system.
More than 300 cities across the U.S. have some sort of rent control or rent
They should
stabilization.
stop that right away. You know, the thing is, you need to have the free flow of goods and services and also people. And the thing is, what you're doing is you're saying some scuzzbum can live here because we want them to, even though they can't afford it and they shouldn't be
You
living
want
there.
New York City
No,
and Los
no,
Angeles
it'll
and every other major
revitalize
city
New York.
to only be for rich freaking people. And by the
It-
way,
it-
you don't
no,
get
no,
rid of
it's for
slums.
people that
What
are
you
willing
do
to
is
work
you drive like people who come to LA to try to make it in entertainment, and they get
And
some
if they don't make it, they
PA
leave.
job for $800 a week. You're going to put those people. They don't move out of LA. They move to the shitty parts of LA, and they
Yeah, or you leave the city. I mean, the thing is, there's no, hey, I showed up, I have a right to live here forever. No, and if they were smart and they believe that rent's a problem, they could always buy a condo. Why don't they buy something rather than rent? Tell me.
Because
Talk
a
to me.
New York City condo is in Manhattan, you're not going to find one for less than $1 million. In Queens,
And you get a mortgage like everybody else in order to take some self-responsibility like everybody else. You know, this freeloading attitude has got to stop, and it stopped in Florida a long time ago, and, it's never stopped in New York. I don't get it. You know, this entitlement mentality. Oh my Lord! Speaking of entitlement, here comes Jatovi. You know, no, I'm totally against rent control. Of course, I've been a landlord and a tenant, and I can tell you it doesn't work. It's bad for both sides. It's like a chess game, and it's bad.
Florida doesn't have rent control.
Sides. It's bad for both sides. As a landlord, I can tell you it's horrible. As a tenant, it's also horrible. It's bad for both sides. So what you got to do is abolish rent control and let Adam Smith
abolish rent control. And let the price of a one bedroom New York
it could be $10,000
rise to $6,000 a month, $7,000,
whatever it is.
So Manhattan is going to be
quick question
an island for rich.
Well, quick question. What's the argument against rent control?
The argument is that the people with the landlord won't maintain their property.
It doesn't work for the environment. It doesn't work for the property. In a capitalistic system, it doesn't work. In a communist system, it also doesn't work. Look at Cuba. Everybody has a free place in Cuba. And Cuba is
real quick.
Donald Trump is correct.
Real quick.
So, as soon as you abolish rent control, the better off New York City.
Nick, you didn't give me an argument. All you said was it doesn't.
I'm saying it doesn't work. Let me tell you why it doesn't work.
There we go. Get to the argument, please.
I don't know if you've ever been a landlord. I have. I had a lot of properties. Okay, let me tell you something. Something breaks down, we fix it. Why do we keep our property up? Because we know we can get the rent. If somebody came along and said your rent is frozen and something breaks, I don't want to fix it anymore. I have no incentive to do anything with that property anymore because basically I don't own it anymore. The government just took it over and is telling me what to charge. And every landlord who's listening to this show understands that. Okay. Now I was a tenant before. Okay. And as a tenant, I'd call a landlord up and say, hey, fix it. And they would fix it. But we didn't have rent control. Okay. And if I ask too many times, guess what happens? My rent goes up. So, the thing is, that system actually works for everybody. The system that they installed in New York and still have today doesn't work for anybody. Yet they're convinced Oh,
So
somebody, some Democrat came and
hold
saved
on.
me by not
Wait.
allowing my rent to go up. Oh my
Nick,
Lord.
you're giving
No,
me a bunch of anecdotes.
that's
You haven't actually
BS.
given me an argument yet.
I
I'm
already
still
told you it
waiting to
becomes an
hear.
S-hole.
Wait.
It becomes,
No,
what do you call
Nick,
it?
let me explain so you can understand where I'm asking, why I'm
Then
asking the
tell me
question.
why rent control
I
works.
can't even get out of word because I'm trying to explain to you what I'm hearing you say so
It
we
doesn't
can
work.
actually have a legitimate discussion.
There we go.
So what you stated is that rent control doesn't work because it doesn't work. Then I asked again, Nick, can you give me an argument? Then you stated it doesn't work because we live in a capitalist society and I can't fix things and I can't make money as the landlord. And then for the tenant, you didn't really give an answer besides it doesn't work. So I'm trying to figure out what makes it not work. Because, for example, if we're talking about the rent control or the price caps on rent is basically all it is. It's trying to stop it at a particular point. So basically, everyday people would be able to live and not be gentrified or not be pushed out of the actual area that they're living in. So therefore, individuals who want to live in that area, who cannot move, who cannot get out of where they are, it allows for them to stay in the positions that they're sitting in. And then in terms of the rent control, you're talking about putting a cap on, hey, a landlord can't make extra money off of a tenant because not every day is something breaking. So therefore, what the rent control is doing is actually keeping a cap, allowing for people to sit at a particular price point in their house and they're not being booted out, because where are they going to go outside of where they're living now? So my question to you again is, give me a reason why not forcing people out onto the street is a bad thing.
All right, so
okay, wait.
hold on, let me say something. Hold on, let me say something for a second.
They are not on the street.
Without rent
If
control,
you can't pay your rent, here's
without
what you do.
rent control,
You
one
move to
bedroom
another
Manhattan
place.
apartment
Hello?
would run between
Move
$5,400
to
and
another place. If you can't
$6,000
afford
a
this
month.
place,
Now,
move to another place.
in Nick's favor, the rent stabilization and control laws in New York City, they pass the different laws every few years. The one passed in 2019 has contributed to there being 50,000, according to this one article, vacant ghost apartments in New York City where they can't be rented because the amount that they could charge for rent isn't enough to pay for renovating them and making them habitable. So, yeah, not all rent control legislation or policies leads to positive outcomes. But New York has had some kind of rent control for 80 years.
And it hasn't worked
And
for
so-
80 years.
and so
Florida has
now-
never
and
had
now-
it.
and
it's
now
worked
as
for
a way
100
to
years.
as a way
Just
to
because
fix
New York
that.
doesn't get it doesn't
I
mean
mean,
it's right.
we're having a housing issue across, the nation in the first place. As a way to fix in terms of that housing issue that we're having, and yes, the upkeep of New York apartment complexes is rather expensive. What is a way to balance that? Because even if you don't have the rent controls, you're not going to have these individuals moving into New York in that fashion. I mean, you charge 100. We have places in downtown Durham that aren't being rented out because the cap on that rent or that price on that rent is way too high. So what is better, to have a facility that is lived in at a lower cost, or a ghost town at such a high expense that people can't live in? So now it's just trying to find a balance between the two. How do you actually effectively get an apartment at a price point that not only is livable, but also somewhere that can be sustained and can be upkept? So that's where that balancing act is. Which one is better?
I got a question for you, Nick. Hold on a second. I got a question for you, Nick. Hold on. I got a question for you. I got a question for you, Nick, because I'm trying to understand what you're saying. Because if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that if somebody is not able to afford their rent in New York, that they should move to either
Move.
New Jersey or Delaware or some other
Yeah,
place and everything like that.
Pennsylvania.
But not everybody can afford to move that has lived there. I know for a fact I've got friends in New York, and I also know that Jacoby's got friends in New York. Some of them are natives of New York that were born there and don't necessarily have the resources to move to, say, Florida or to another city, even another city that is adjacent and everything like that. So what are your solutions for those people that
Give me a
can't
break.
afford to move? Not
Okay.
everybody can afford to move.
Look, if you're living in New York and you're working in New York, you can afford to live almost anywhere. Give me a break. You know, the thing is, it's not that they can't afford to. They can afford to. They just don't want to because they believe they're entitled to live there, and they're not.
No.
Okay. I think Sasha has a point.
Okay, in Toronto, we have 3% rent control. The rent cannot be
God.
increased more than 3%. And even if the rent, as you say, that the owners or managers cannot fix things because of rent control, but let's see who controls what they fix and what they don't. Now, if they will increase rent to 8% instead of 3 or even 15%, and they will continue to fix just whatever they were fixing every year prior to that. So how is that substantially increased rent will benefit tenants? Not at all. It's not benefiting them. Now, many businesses, for example, they have increased expenses, especially with the prices for gas and some other stuff. The real estate, it's most, how I say, cash-inducive activity, which all you do, you sit on your property, extract maximum rent, whatever is available, and do nothing. Do as little fixing as possible and just collect the money. So you're not producing anything, you're not creating anything. So you are not entitled to substantial increases in your profitability, simply because you're not entitled to that. You don't deserve that. You don't do any positive activity that the society benefits from it. You are nothing but parasites. So therefore, I don't understand your entitlement to
Well,
rent.
I totally disagree, Sasha.
Oh,
Okay,
really?
you are doing
Here's
something.
how it
But let me
works in
tell you,
practical
because
terms.
I invest in real estate, and so I have to spend a lot of time actually looking at properties, determining, okay, is
But
this
you're not
property going to
producing
fit?
anything. Okay, you're
Yeah,
trying to enrich yourself,
I'm
but you're not for society. You're
I
not
am
producing
producing something
anything.
for
You're not
society.
entitled to anything.
I
Okay,
am producing
that's
a
just a simple.
property
You are
available
not
for
producing
rent.
anything.
I
Okay.
am.
No,
I'm
you're
producing
producing
property that's
something
All
for
right,
available
yourself.
here's how
I
it works
keep it-
in New York
keep it in
City
excellent
in
shape
practical
so I can get
terms.
top rent.
Here's how it
Excellent
works.
shape.
All right,
Okay,
here's
what
how
you guys are
it,
doing
shut
is
up for a
coming along
second. Here's
saying,
how
no,
it
tenants
works.
have all the
In
rights.
New York
and landlords
City,
don't.
if
That's
you
just
live
not
in a
true.
rent control apartment, your landlord hates you and refuses to fix anything. So you fix this, you hire
So you
your
go
own.
buy a house, dude. Go buy a condo.
You
Grow
No,
up.
can't.
you
It's $1
do
million.
watch The Godfather.
Here's how it.
Remember
Let
when
me.
this
I
guy
believe
Italian
you.
Buy
guy
a
comes to
condo if you
Godfather
don't like
and
paying
says that
rent. That's what I
the
do.
old woman,
You're
she's
like,
now forced
You
out
know,
of the
take some
apartment, and he
responsibility.
talked
You're
to him
Marie
and make
Antoinette
sure
telling
that
people
It's
no,
this
to behave.
there's
tenant
no
mentality.
repercussion,
Hold on,
there's a
real quick.
decrease.
Real quick,
Your
because right
tenant
now,
mentality.
well,
Buy
hold on,
a
hold on.
condo.
Nick,
Grow up.
Yeah.
hold on.
Nick, just
Yeah.
to point out, and this could help the conversation because you tend to just drop in these random things. Your personal anecdotes do not matter in this conversation. We do not care about your personal anecdotes that you could move, that you looked at this stuff. No one cares because you do not represent the populace or the population that we're talking about. Because you can move and you have the money and you have the resources to invest in a home, invest in a condo, invest in this. The individuals that we're talking about cannot. And you talking about, well, you can just up and move. You're forgetting that the people that we're talking about are working in New York City. And if they up and move, that means they're now jobless. They've spent over $8,000 to move out of New York City just to move their stuff. They have no money. They're not like you. So again, your personal anecdotes.
Here's how it works in practical terms in New York City. So just because you don't have a rent control apartment, it's not necessarily a guarantee that your landlord will be responsive. In New York City, you're used to bad service, and it's luck of the draw. And if you have rent control, you know your landlord is not going to be super helpful unless you can tip the building manager to help you out, or else you bring in your own handyman. It's a cost of living in New York City. You're going to pay for a lot of your own repairs. You're also going to do at certain points in New York history, you're going to do Little House on the Prairie. You're going to in the 70s, 80s, when there were a bunch of vacant properties because the economy was bad. I know people who bought a fucking warehouse in a no-go area like Alphabet City, and they illegally lived there while they fixed it up. And those places that these people bought for 75 grand in 1980, they were able to sell 20 years later for $12 million. New York City is a weird, wild, place to try to live, and rent control is part of the landscape.
And rent control doesn't work. You can see the economy of Florida versus the economy of New York.
Money drives
Florida
New York.
is growing.
You're not going to turn New York into any kind of utopia.
Florida is the fastest growing economy in the United States. Why? They don't have stupid rent control.
You have a governor who understands
economics.
You have no
understand. You can't just tax your way out of a problem. The governor DeSantis, he understands that you just can't give away everything and expect your state to get better. So Florida is the fastest growing economy.
You're going to get
hit
somewhere. In Florida, the average property tax is $8,300 a year. Miami, you can get an apartment in Miami for $2,500, $3,000 a month, which is, I don't know, probably about 60% of what it would be in Manhattan, because Manhattan is only 24 square miles. Miami is probably a couple hundred square miles. It's sprawled out over everywhere. But there's stuff that makes living in Florida not great. You can't get homeowners insurance. You tell people to buy a house. Okay, so you go to Florida, you buy a house, but your house you don't want to buy it on the beach because you can't get coverage when a hurricane causes $150,000 worth of damage to your house.
You can get it. You just don't want to pay for it. It's going to be extremely expensive. But a lot of people don't live on the coast of Florida. They live inland. And all those people who are crying in New York, oh, please give me rent control. They can move to Florida. They can get great jobs there. They can live in a great economy. They don't have to deal with the government intrusions like rent control, and certainly don't have to deal with Mandami and his giveaway programs. Are just going to turn the whole city into one big slum like it used to be in the 70s. So, I think it'd be good for them to pick up and leave.
I lived in New York in the 80s, and it wasn't a slum. It had some parts that were messed up. Like my wife,
like the Bronx.
There's always been the hot garbage smell in New York, where in the summer there's a dumpster smell because people put their trash out, and it gets to be 95 degrees, and the trash ferments. And they're giant rats, but those are fun to watch.
Nick.
Giant rats are fun to watch.
Nick.
Okay, that's a good thing to say. So I'm glad to see that they have a system that doesn't work in New York. It's called rent control. They don't have it in Florida. They've never had it in Florida, and of course it works.
Nick,
go on.
You claim Florida was the fastest growing economy
in the state, United States. Yeah, is there something faster in Florida?
I mean, you always go to AI. Well, it just points out Washington State, California, and the Carolinas currently boast the fastest growing state economies in the U.S. So, again, I hate to fact check you in real life or in real time, but you just make up statistics and just say
Washington
random
State
things and try and pass.
I used to live in Washington State.
So, just to point out, you saying these things, again, let's do some research behind the stuff.
So here's an article from yesterday's New York Post. Miami's surging cost of living has surpassed New York City's for the first time ever, according to U.S. data. Now, the New York Post isn't necessarily trustworthy, but this is based on something that, you know, so.
Yeah, but not only that, but Nick, I'm assuming that.
Oh yeah. Well, the thing is, I guess you're looking at small states like Washington, Nevada, and Montana, because as you go further,
North Carolina,
it said Washington State, California is not a small state.
Well, my machine's different than yours. It doesn't even mention California. It goes Washington, Nevada, small state, Montana. So at a percent of GDP, that might be true. However, the large states are Texas, Florida, and North Carolina.
The total cost of housing in the Miami
North Carolina's not a large state.
Metropolitan areas is now about 5% higher than in New York and its suburbs. So it's not cheap to live in the fun parts of Florida either.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
That's true, but they also don't have the stupid rent control there. So if you can't afford to live there, you don't run to Florida, go in a high rent district, and then when the rents go, oh, my rent doesn't go up because it's frozen. Why? Because
just let me point something out. Let me point something out, because this is where stupidity has taken over. I hate to say stupidity, but that's what it's taken over.
Yeah, you're right.
Now, hold on. Let me finish what I'm stating. Now, we just talked about two cities, right? Miami and New York.
If Texas has rent.
And you went and then said, well, you don't move to Miami, you move to Florida. But you haven't said anything about the other cities within New York State. That is the stupidity that I'm talking about. You didn't compare Albany or one of the other smallest, Rochester or Buffalo or all these other places within New York State, but you compared New York City to all of Florida.
Oh,
that is a poor argument.
Another very fast-growing state that doesn't have rent control is the great state of Texas. So here we have two of the largest economies in the United States. They don't.
You are comparing. Again, a city to a state. You ignored the whole point of me pointing out how ridiculous your argument is.
No. The part of the reason
you are comparing a whole city
to a whole state and bad management.
You're not
That's
listening.
part of the reason Washington does so well, and Florida's doing well. New York not doing so well. It's because they have bad policies. You can't start a business in New York and expect to be successful. That's the reason they go to Washington State. They'll go to Florida. And Jacoby, you're laughing because I'm right.
No, because you're just saying random stuff.
Because it's all this government intrusion.
This is what we're about. I'm pulling my Charles Blow hat on because Charles Blow's my dude. I like Charles Blow a lot. The man has a point. When you come on these shows, we're supposed to talk about truth. We're supposed to tell the truth. We're supposed to express the truth and put out facts out there. You saying random stuff again. You're talking about New York City. You said nothing about Rochester. You said nothing about Buffalo. You said nothing about Albany. You said nothing about Syracuse. You said nothing about the other cities within New York State. You've only talked about New York City and compared that to other states.
I worked in New York.
That's how crazy this is. Think about it. Think about it. Think about how poor your argument is that you're complaining about one city, comparing that to
because you don't like the mayor. You don't like the mayor. 300 cities across America have rent control. I lived in Florida. I lived in New York City. I've lived in Los Angeles, and New York will remain a great city into the future, and people will engage in all sorts of tactics to try to afford to live there. Yeah, it's an expensive ass city. You got to hustle to live there. It's the lyrics. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. And
yeah, but it's fading. It's like
it's not. New York has always had
a third class city.
It's fading. Here's a question. Here's a question. To prove that it's not fading, what are we doing here? Nick's whole argument is that
Wait a
he's
minute.
comparing
All the
the
businesses
city
are
that's
going
supposedly fading to whole states.
Yeah.
New York
Texas
has
That
always
tells you.
New York has
Texas,
always
Florida
had
are
interesting
eating
stuff
New York
going
so
on.
much.
If you lived in New York in the 70s, you had Studio 54. You had like people just like discoing all night, wearing no underwear and doing a ton of cocaine. You know, in the 80s, there was a ton of crack. But
Okay.
but
Name
in the
name a big
90s and
Fortune 500
2000s, they
company
cleaned
that
up
came
the
from New York in
city,
the last
and
10
it was
years.
New York is now one of the safest big cities in America. It's nice. It's super expensive. If you're going to live there, you're probably going to have a ton of roommates. You might have to work 2 or 3 jobs, but it's where you go to make it in a bunch of like, if you want to. If you have aspirations of being on Broadway, what the hell are you going to have to do? You're going to try to live in.
Well, the people that want to move there and get on Broadway, they can't afford to move there because some idiot who's sitting on rent control won't let their apartment go.
That's not the case. You get a
I mean, that's the problem.
You get a shitty apartment with a bad
No.
landlord.
The funny part about this, another funny part about this is how ignorant this argument is, which makes no sense.
It's
hold on. Let me
smart,
finish. Let me explain how idiotic. Because we already explained how idiotic it is to argue that a city
There we go.
compared to a full-blown state. Then on top of that, you're arguing so hard about a man who's been in office less than a year, yet you're placing everything on him as if New York's prices weren't expensive last year or the year prior or the year prior or the year prior. Shall I keep going? So
you talked about how he's not helping businesses. So he's got small business support. His administration launched an initiative enacting over 50 reforms to slash red tape, streamline building permits.
That's what Mark said. He's finally woken up by stopping being so woke and decided to move.
He was in the news yesterday where in order to sell ice cream, you needed 2 separate licenses. Somehow ice cream had an additional license. There's like he got rid of that.
He's right to cut through that red tape and get rid of it. That's the thing that's made New York a horrible place to start a business. And that's one reason, if you look at all the Fortune 500 companies and the biggest companies in the United States, where did NVIDIA come from? New York or San Francisco? San Francisco. Okay.
Oh, you think
what
San
about Microsoft?
Francisco's a livable city?
New York or
San Francisco is more
Seattle?
expensive.
Where
than
did Amazon
New
come
York
from?
City.
New York, where they should have come from. That's where all the talent is, right, Rick? No, Amazon.
No, what the computing talent? No, the New York is where
you go through all the major companies.
Start NVIDIA with a bunch of people who want to be on Broadway. There's a
but being on Broadway,
dancers and singers are not your ideal NVIDIA employees. No, you go to
this is the crazy part of your argument, Nick. You're not listening.
A migration.
You're not listening, Nick. If you're going to start, listen. If you're going to start a business in tech, if you're going to start a business in tech, stop. Hold on. You don't go to Texas. No, you go to Silicon Valley. You come actually down here in North Carolina. There are other places where you start tech industry businesses. Please stop saying ignorant stuff. You're just making up stuff to say.
No, North Carolina sucks. They think they're good at startups, but they're really bad. You go to San Francisco, you go to
the Research Triangle in North Carolina is one of the foremost tech incubators in the country.
Or you believe that? Let me tell you something. Go, Rick. Look at
you believe that it just is.
No,
that's the funny thing. Okay. You're just making up
stuff.
Go
look at this demographic where how you say venture capital. How much venture capital to new businesses go to San Francisco Bay Area? How much go to Raleigh Durham? Raleigh Durham wants everybody to leave, but last time I looked at the stat, you're not going to like it. 40% of all startup capital was in the San Francisco Bay Area. Raleigh-Durham 0.075. So it's a dream and a myth that it's a Research Triangle Park is doing well. It's not. It doesn't even pull 1% of startup capital. That's how bad it really is.
Here's a question.
Yeah.
Here, hey, Nick.
And that is
Nick, hold on.
reality.
Nick, you said it's so bad. Where's NVIDIA?
NVIDIA is in San
Thank you.
Francisco.
We're done. It's
Oh,
in
right.
Research Triangle
It's-
Park.
So Research
Yeah,
Triangle,
it's-
North Carolina, has the number 2 and number 7 most educated metros. If you're looking to have,
I'm looking
employees-
for capital, Guy. I'm not looking at education.
Then you're going to New
Capital.
York.
No. Where the capital formation is in San Francisco. If you're listening to this, you don't want to move to Raleigh-Durham because they don't have any money. You don't want to move to New York. They have too much red tape. Unfortunately, you need to move to San Francisco, period, the end, or Seattle. And if you look at it historically in the last 20, 30 years, all the big companies have come out of Seattle and Washington. And now Texas is starting to take over, Austin, Texas, and they're not even going to Washington or California because they're too crazy in their tax system. So with that,
So, okay, so
Crazy
California gets tarred with the high income tax thing. I've lived here for 30 years. I've never paid more than 4 or 5% in state income taxes. Usually it's 2 or 3%. And my property taxes are less than 1/3 of 1%. They're going to get you somehow. The states have to pay for the stuff they do somehow. Texas, Florida, they don't have state income tax. They have property tax. Average.
yeah, but the property taxes are low because they don't spend that much on their people and education.
All right, so yeah,
So they
okay.
give you a
So
horrible
shitty
education.
schools, and in Florida, you're still going to pay $8,300 a month on average in property tax.
Yeah, that's true. But what's also true is we're out of time. So
Okay,
we'll have
all
to
right. See you tomorrow.
We're adjourned till next time. Bye-bye.